Many of you are familiar with the TV show Snowfall, focusing on the fictional character Franklin Saint and how he grew his multi-million-dollar cocaine empire. But what if I told you that it wasn't all fiction? What if I told you that Franklin Saint was actually based on a real person? Beneath the scripted drama lies a true story, a real man, a drug empire that made billions, and a mastermind. This is the true story of Freeway Rick Ross. Rick Ross grew up in South Central Los Angeles, but Rick wasn't your typical street kid. He had a passion. That passion was tennis. He was good, so good that college coaches were eyeing him for scholarships. But there was a problem. Rick couldn't read. His grades were too poor, and his family too broke to fund his tennis dreams. Unlike other kids who traveled to tournaments every weekend, Rick had no support system. His mother worked hard, but they were barely scraping by. His tennis scholarship dreams died before they even had a chance to live. After high school, he enrolled in a technical school called Trade Tech, studying car upholstery. He also played tennis for the school, but life kept pushing him toward the streets. Rick bounced between odd jobs. One of his first gigs was working on cars, but the real turning point came when he started running errands for local pimps, washing their cars, buying their supplies, doing whatever needed to be done. Rick became almost like a little brother to them. They were flashy, rich, respected. Not only did they get money from pimping, but they also got it from selling cocaine. After Rick asking several times if he could be put on with the coke business, one of these pimps finally handed Rick a tiny package, just 0.2 of a gram of cocaine in rock form. Back then, cocaine wasn't a street drug. It was for the rich. Nobody knew what to do with the rocks. Rick and his friend tried to sell it around town. It took forever to get their first customer. But when that customer paid them $100 for a rock, something clicked. The hustle was on. Rick started slow. At first, they were lucky to make $20 or $30 a week. They targeted pimps, prostitutes, and tricks. Anyone in the lifestyle. It started going up from there. They would get $100 to $200 days. He reinvested every penny he made back into the coke. After a year, he had saved $50,000. But his mom got suspicious. Tired of the shady people showing up at her home, kicked him out. But that didn't stop him. Rick got his own place and went all in. He cut ties with his original plug, who wasn't taking the business seriously. Then came a fateful conversation with his old tennis coach, Mr. Fisher. Rick told Mr. Fisher why he hadn't been around. He was selling cocaine. To Rick's surprise, Fisher revealed he used to deal coke himself and had made $250,000 doing it. Then Mr. Fisher dropped the biggest bomb. He could introduce Rick to a real plug. That plug was Henry, a Nicaraguan connection who would change everything. Henry sold Rick ounces of cocaine for $3,300. Rick would flip each ounce for $9,000. He cooked it into ready rock, what we now call crack. Business exploded. Rick began recruiting dealers from across LA. He understood business, territory, loyalty. He wasn't just selling drugs. He was building a network. Cricks, Bloods, and other crews lined up to buy from him. Why? Because Rick gave them product cheaper than anyone else. He started buying more and learning more. The more you buy, the cheaper it gets. He scaled up, fast. At his peak, Rick was cooking 200 to 300 kilos of cocaine a night. The numbers were insane. In a single day, he could make over $3 million per day without lifting a finger. Between 1982 and 1989, Rick Ross generated over $900 million, which is over $2.7 billion today. He didn't just buy flashy cars. He owned motels, apartment complexes, and over 20 different houses. He was building his own empire, and he did it all without violence, without headlines, just business. But it all came to a crashing halt in 1989. After years at the top, the DEA and FBI were closing in. Rick was arrested and charged in a federal case. Instead of running, he turned himself in. He was sentenced and served time, but this moment made him walk away from the game, at least for a while. When Rick got out of prison in the early 90s, he was determined not to go back. He took on humble jobs like cleaning construction sites. Gone was the millionaire drug lord. Now he was making ends meet with honest labor. But fate had another twist. Danilo Blandone, Rick's main supplier during his drug empire, reached out. Now working with the DEA, Blandone called Rick repeatedly for 6 months, trying to lure him back into the game. Rick resisted, until a low point financially pushed him over the edge. His theater project was in foreclosure. He was desperate. Blandone offered him a deal, 100 kilos. They met in a San Diego parking lot, but it was a setup. Blandone arrived with the feds. Rick tried to flee, but it was over. He was arrested and charged. Because Rick had already been convicted 2 times before, this was his 3rd strike. 3 strikes means a harsher prison sentence. The prosecution wanted life. Rick tried to plead guilty to 20 years. They refused. He was sentenced to life in federal prison. A man who once couldn't read had to become his own lawyer. In prison, Rick read over 300 books. He lived in the law library. It was there that he uncovered the shocking truth behind his empire. Through investigative journalist Gary Webb's 1996 series, Dark Alliance, Rick learned that his main supplier, Danilo Blandone, was actually working with the CIA. Blandone had been part of a scheme to funnel cocaine into South Central Los Angeles to raise money for the Nicaraguan Contra, a US-backed rebel group. Without realizing it, Rick had been a pawn in a massive operation to fund a covert war. Although shocked, Rick kept reading in the law library, and there he found the technicality that would save him. He discovered that one of his previous convictions shouldn't count as a strike under federal law. He argued his own case, filed an appeal, and in 1998, his life sentence was overturned. He served 14 years in total. Rick Ross walked out of prison in 2009. Since his release, Rick Ross has stayed out of the drug game. He's written books, done speaking tours, and owns his own cannabis dispensary. He uses his story to educate and inspire, from being illiterate to reading law books that freed him, from washing cars for pimps to building a billion-dollar drug empire. From the streets to the spotlight, Rick Ross is a story of tragedy, hustle, intelligence, and redemption. He was the real-life Franklin Saint, but unlike the show, Rick's story didn't end in tragedy. His story continues. Welcome to the Wealth Files, the show where we uncover how people got rich by any means necessary. Hustlers, visionaries, and empire builders. This is where the raw, unfiltered stories of wealth come to life. If you found this story as unbelievable and powerful as we did, don't forget to like the video. It helps more people discover stories like this. And if you want more deep dives into real-life legends behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Question for you. If you were in Rick Ross's shoes, do you think you would have taken that first deal or walked away? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the truth is even wilder than fiction.